Rune Factory is an interesting series. It is a spin-off of Marvelous's Story of Seasons series, formerly called Harvest Moon, and adds a fantasy aspect to the farming social sim formula. Whereas in Story of Seasons, you trade a gun or a sword for a watering can, in Rune Factory, you can use a watering can and a sword. However, no guns. Personally, the Rune Factory formula is probably one of my favorite JRPG formulas, ranking up there with the likes of Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, and a lot of people can relate to my sentiments on how much they love the series, so much so that people have been wondering where in the world is Rune Factory 5? Well, to answer that question, we need to ask a more broader one. What happened to Rune Factory? The Rune Factory series was pitched to Story of Seasons creator Yasuhiro Wada by Yoshifumi Hashimoto. Hashimoto-san describes getting the green light as an uphill battle via an interview. He goes on to say that not only was Marvelous opposed to the idea of turning the Bokujo series into a fantasy RPG, so were a lot of fans of the series, saying it would be rather unnecessary. However, after pushing his pitch for a fantasy RPG game, Hashimoto-san would eventually get the green light to create the fantasy world he had envisioned. This game would take on the name of Rune Factory Shin Bokujo Monogatari, or Rune Factory A New Ranch Story, to solidify itself as a spin-off of the Bokujo series. Whereas in the West, this series would go on to be called Rune Factory A Fantasy Harvest Moon by its initial localizers. While it kept the Fantasy Harvest Moon subtext for most of its entries in the West, Hashimoto-san only wanted the series to carry the Shin Bokujo Monogatari title for the first game to establish itself, and from there grow the series on its own merit. From there, the series did grow quite strong. Hashimoto-san alongside Neverland Studios created a grand total of 6 Rune Factory games. The Rune Factory series would become one of Marvelous's most popular IPs, next to the mainline Bokujo series. While the series had a nice amount of success across most of its entries, it couldn't stop the growing disaster from striking the developer Neverland near the end of 2013. In late 2013, Neverland would cease all production of the development of all their current projects and file for bankruptcy, putting all of their projects on hold, including an already greenlit Rune Factory 5. Before we talk about the bankruptcy a bit more, let's first discuss who and what Neverland was. Neverland was a Japanese video game developer that was best known for not only making the Rune Factory series, but also the Lufia series. Even when Wada-san left Marvelous back in 2010 and Hashimoto-san took over as the main Bokujo producer, Hashimoto-san was still the one in charge of the Rune Factory series. After the release of Rune Factory 4 in 2012, Marvelous had offered Neverland to make a new Rune Factory game, or instead work on a completely new IP. Having just finished working on Rune Factory 4, the team easily picked the new IP, which came to be known as Forbidden Magna, or better known overseas as Lord of Magna Made in Heaven. Sadly, before development could be completed, Neverland had filed for bankruptcy. Shortly after their closure, Marvelous hired the entire development team to work alongside them, thus saving Lord of Magna, and most importantly, their jobs. Neverland's bankruptcy was out of the blue. They had just seen success with Rune Factory 4's release in Japan. It had become their best-selling game in the series to date, and it increased Marvelous's projected profits for 2012 by over 100%, giving them the green light to make Rune Factory 5. But that seems like it wasn't enough. One could speculate that their closure could have had something to do with the poor performance of Rune Factory Tides of Destiny in the West, receiving mixed reviews among critics at best. I had reached out to Marvelous's North American subsidiary Xseed Games to see if they could shed any light on Neverland's abrupt closure. Sadly, Xseed declined to comment on the matter. For those of you who are wondering, the bankruptcy actually had little to do with the delay of Rune Factory 4 in Europe. The localization process that Xseed had to go through was quite a large one according to their recent localization blog. So, where does this leave the Rune Factory series? Well, Marvelous and Xseed have both expressed a desire to continue the Rune Factory series in the near future. In an interview with Destructoid, this is what Xseed had to say regarding the status of the series. There are continuing discussions on how to keep the Rune Factory series going. Despite Neverland, the original developers, no longer being around, hopefully, something will come of that in the not too distant future, because Rune Factory 4 was the best-selling title in the series, I believe, and it's a series that's been growing and growing over the years. Marvelous knows fans are clamoring for a sequel and are looking for ways to make it happen, so it's good to see that Marvelous is aware of the demand for a new Rune Factory entry. At this point, the ball is in their court. You're probably asking what the holdup on this is. Well, game development can take time, and it's not unheard of for developers to hire new teams to work on other projects. Even though the Rune Factory team is now working for Marvelous, Hashimoto-san is still in charge of the Story of Seasons series, so one can only assume that they've been working alongside him on that series, and probably is a new one heading to the Nintendo Switch in the foreseeable future. It's hard to say when we will ever see the light of Rune Factory 5. If it will be a Nintendo Switch game, a PlayStation 4 game, or even a 3DS game. What we do know is that the game does exist in some shape or form, and it's only a matter of time before we see it. And there you have it. The short and sweet of what happened to Rune Factory is, well, nothing happened to it. It just went through a lot of hoops recently. The series is still alive with a future ahead of it. A lot of people seem to have the idea that the Rune Factory series was owned by Neverland, and it went down with the company. I have even seen some people think that the series is also owned by Natsume. Thankfully, that seems like it's not the case, and rests safely in Marvelous's line of games, and the future of the series rests on them. With a new Story of Seasons game heading to the Switch, we could hear some news of a Rune Factory game after its release. I would like to thank Xseed Games for providing some information to help with this video. Keep up the great work localizing amazing and niche games. If you have any more questions for me, by all means leave them down in the comment section below. I would love to answer whatever questions you have for me. Also, if you're new to my channel, just finding me out for the first time through this, be sure to stick around and subscribe for future reviews, let's plays, commentaries, and more. And as always everyone, thanks for watching.